Welcome back. I really am so happy today to be able to introduce to you in person my colleague and friend Irwin Goldman in the Department of Horticulture. And Irwin is an expert on plant breeding, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to actually see what it's like to breed plants and ask you some basic questions and have you tell us a little bit about the process of altering plants to kind of benefit people.
Yeah.
So Irwin, why don't you just introduce yourself really briefly and we'll just go from there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Claudio, and thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be able to talk about this subject. It's my favorite subject. And I'm a plant breeder. I've been a plant breeder for almost 30 years here in the Department of Horticulture, and I breed vegetable crops. But in particular, I breed three crops, beet, carrot, and onion, that are all biennial. And so we can talk a little bit about that, which is something humans have essentially derived from wild plants to make abundant vegetable crops.
So biennial means what exactly?
So biennial means that it takes 2 full seasons for the plant to go from seed to seed. And so we plant breeders like to talk about seed to seed as sort of a full life cycle for the plant. So let's just use the example of a carrot. If we plant a carrot seed in the spring, everybody knows that by the late summer or early fall we get a beautiful carrot root, but that's only half of the story. So if a person were to take a carrot root and put it in their fridge for 12 to 14 weeks and really keep it in good condition, if they planted that root again, it would send up a flower stalk in the next season and it would produce seed. And so really that, for a plant breeder, it's not just about the vegetable or the fruit that's produced. It's really about how do we control the pollination in the second phase to get what we want. And so biennialism is really, I think, something humans created. They took annual plants that were growing in the wild and they made plants that grew as big as possible during the first growing season, so they had more to eat. And then the second season was all about producing seed for the following generation.
Because that's how you can control the traits and who mates with whom is through that flower production and the seed production.
Exactly. And if you can get the plant to not flower in the first year, then you don't have the interference of that. You just have the thing you eat, and then you deal with the pollination the second year. Imagine, though, if you had the pollination occurring during the first year, it would be a mess. And here's an example of that. If we look at this plant right here, here's a flowering plant. If I wanted to eat this, if I wanted to eat the leaves, well, I've got this big flower stalk. This thing is woody, it's not going to taste good. And so selecting for biennialism, which would be this, means no flowers and only edible material in the first year.
And the plant is basically making some decisions about where to allocate its energy.
Exactly. And so this we call, in a generic term, we call it bolting. These plants have triggered, they're moving into reproductive growth, and so that signal for bolting has happened, and this plant is no longer something you'd ever want to eat. And so we want to keep that signal from happening. And I think humans, this plant actually right here, this is Swiss chard and this is table beet in these rows here, is an excellent example of what humans have done to modify plants from the wild. So let's just look at this one right here, which is Swiss chard. Swiss chard is just it's just a thing of great beauty. And if you can see right here, humans took a wild plant that was growing on the Mediterranean seacoast. So this is a plant that was domesticated by Roman times. I mean, the Romans were huge consumers of Swiss chard. And
they still are, by the way.
And they still are. That's right. And
I speak from experience.
It's a thing of great beauty and a great culinary addition. These petioles here are what people really wanted. I think it was a big part of what people selected. So this is the petiole.
The stem of the leaf.
The stem of the leaf,
right?
exactly. And this is the leaf blade. And so it was selecting a wild plant that they found growing on the Mediterranean seacoast. That plant was called Beta Maritima, and it still grows there today. They made very, very large petioles, which are, crunchy and fantastic.
And the color is just fantastic.
There's vivid colors, right? These beautiful leaves. And this was their salad crop. Just like lettuce, this would have been a primary salad crop in the Mediterranean, really for centuries, really for millennia. as the plant moved out of the Mediterranean basin and into northern Europe, people began selecting for something that they could eat during the winter. So that made for the table beet. Now, this is derived from that. This is the progenitor. People wanted something that they could bury in the ground or bury in a cellar and store over winter and eat it. And this thing is the perfect version of that.
Lasts for a long time. Yeah.
Lasts for months and months and months, take you all the way through the winter. I have beets that I harvested in this farm last August that I still have in a cooler, and they're in great shape. This thing is succulent. It's beautiful. It's got some of the same pigments.
Oh, look at those colors.
Kind of a candy stripe, and it's biennial. So that means that it is not going to go. It didn't go to flower. It spent the whole growing season maximizing storage of photosynthate, sugars, and actually sucrose in the case of beet, and other nutrients down here. And it's just a perfect way to produce food that can get you through the winter.
So, Irwin, when you say people selected for them, what do you mean by selected? They actually pick plants in a field. They're like, oh, I like this one because it has these traits. What does that actually look like?
It's a great question. So plant breeding, and actually before deliberate plant breeding, domestication is all about manipulating the genes of the plant to get what you want. So they would have had to let Swiss chard flower. And here is an example of Swiss chard flowering right here. Okay. They would have had to let the plants go here. They would have taken individuals that they liked and mated them with individuals that they liked. And so you might use the aphorism like begets like. You know, you say, okay, I like the taste of this one, or I like the shape of this one, and I'm going to cross this plant with that plant. And when I say cross, I mean the pollen from this is going to land on the stigmas and pollinate and fertilize that plant, and ultimately produce a hybrid seed. That hybrid seed would be grown, and we would do the whole process over and over again, not just for years, but for generations. And
some of those hybrids are going to have the traits, the combination of the traits you want. Some of them are probably not going to be all that perfect.
Exactly. And that would be exactly the case, what you just said, Claudia, with beets and chard. So imagine somebody is selecting in populations of chard for a plant that has a slightly swollen root. Right? It's going to have like a little bit of a swollen root, like the size of a marble or maybe a golf ball if they're lucky. And they're going to have to then cross that again with, they're going to have to cross that, and over time there'll be a lot of variability in there, and they'll have to select the ones they want. So it's a cyclical selection process.